Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Landy Lodge, where today we're going to be doing a very raw and honest review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But before we get into all of that, we got to thank the people who make it possible. The beautiful names you see on your screen are the Sages of the Lodge. They are either YouTube channel members or they donate directly. But like I always say to all you sickos and normies, all I ask is that you come, hang out, chill in the chat, share your thoughts. But hey, let's give a shout out to some other sages. We got some new sages. Dis Hybrid and Ryansuke Akutagawa just rejoined. So want to give a special shout out to them. And with that said, I think it's time we pull up the curtain on today. I'm very excited to discuss Rebirth. You know, I've got a lot of clips and a lot of stuff pulled up for us to discuss. We will most certainly be getting into that. We want to talk about very specific things. But before we get into that, I think the best thing I can do is really let the audience know where I'm coming from. Whether you're someone who has been in the lodge for a while, you know who I am, what FF7 means to me. Maybe you're usually listening to my Kingdom Hearts stuff or my Soul Calibur stuff or something else. But I feel like if I'm going to give you my honest opinion about stuff, a lot of that opinion is going to be rooted in my experience with Final Fantasy VII through my life. So just to let people know, I've been a huge fan of the original my entire life. I'm somebody who wanted this remake to be different from the original. You know, consider me a rare breed online, maybe. I don't know. The discourse on that seems to be relatively two-sided. But I knew going into this, I wanted things to be different. Because I feel like the first game is so beautiful, it doesn't really need a remake. You know, if you're going to remake it, mix up the bag a little bit. Because I think when you do something that differentiates itself from the original, now the original gets to always shine in its own little corner. It doesn't, you know what I mean? You don't need to update it for a modern audience. So I've always liked the approach they've taken with FF7. However, one of the things that makes me very excited to talk about this today, and I suppose we can maybe start rolling a little bit on this, is that, look, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the best games I've played in the last 5 years, maybe even the last 10 years. However, as much as I love it, adore it, am endlessly playing it, I think I'm 80 hours deep now, I have a lot of criticisms. And I think the reason why I have a lot of criticisms is because I genuinely really love this franchise, this property, and this particular installment in the series. So I have a lot that I want to gush about, that I think Square Enix did so right, that I hope sets a precedent for a lot of their action RPGs and Final Fantasy titles in general moving forward. But there's also, you know, there's a couple things I think they dropped the ball on, and there's a number of things that I think can really be improved upon. And I think that's good news, right? Because this is the second installment of 3. So to me, what's going to make the third installment memorable is if they can address some of these concerns, some of these criticisms, some of these, I guess, perspectives. But anyway, before we get into it, let's give a warm and huge shout out to Mira Limit, who's starting us off with a $30 super chat. Getting things rolling here in the lodge. What's going on, Zane, Mirror Limit, Connor, Lands of Masters, who, by the way, was an incredible mod during the FF7 Rebirth streams, so they would not have gone as smoothly as they did without him. What's going on, Dominic? What's going on, Zeb, Falcone, and T13? I think that's how that would come out. But, all right. Look, again, you guys know where I'm coming from. I've been a lifetime long fan of this property, but let's talk a little bit about, let me pull this up here. Okay. Let's talk about the gameplay first and foremost. I know I just switched sides on you. Don't let it throw you off. But I actually want to discuss the gameplay first and foremost, because at the end of the day, you guys know me, I love the stories in video games, particularly the ones that Square Enix and this particular studio within Square Enix puts out. So, as you guys know, huge fan of these stories, narratives, and characters. And God, do I want to gush and critique some of that later. However, these are games. So first and foremost, when we're going to review this game, we are going to discuss the gameplay, which I actually believe is and this is not a shot at the plot, the characters, the soundtrack, the graphics, and this is not a shot at anything else. But I think that the combat combined with the rest of the gameplay, particularly things they improved upon between Remake and Rebirth, I believe the gameplay, by far and away, is the best thing about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think it's the best thing that they have going for them. Okay. And I am curious, Zane's bringing up the majority reception of Rebirth has been positive. I've definitely seen that. But even I think, it's something my friend Andy Brew said on Twitter today. Don't trust a creator that's not willing to criticize the things they love. Something along those lines. But yeah, big W's in the chat. Let's talk about the gameplay. So the highlight of the gameplay for me was the combat. Maybe we can pull up to maybe a boss battle here at the end of the chapter, just to showcase a little bit of what that is like. But honestly, I thought that, I felt the combat was not only the highlight of the gameplay in Remake, I felt like it was the highlight of the entire experience. And I think Rebirth is more of the same. But one thing I was worried about, and I brought this up on earlier episodes, is I didn't want to feel like I was playing like Remake 2.0. I didn't want to feel like I was playing a patched version of the Remake combat. I wanted Rebirth's combat to feel familiar enough that it felt like it's from the same trilogy, but different enough that it differentiates itself from a previous installment. And I actually feel like Square Enix really found that happy medium here with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Seriously, everything. I will say I do have my critiques and we'll get to them, but let's gush first, why don't we? Let's take Cloud, for example, because we had a lot of new fighters that got added to this. So characters like Red 13, characters like Kate Sith, and a more fleshed out Yuffie obviously helped to make this game feel fresh. But I think what was equally as impressive was not the amount of love, care, and attention that went into, say, the amount of love, care, and attention that went into the new characters for us to play, but the old characters as well. They added so many new abilities to characters like Cloud, like for example, which I love that you have these abilities now that allow you to use very sort of weaker magic attacks combined with your physical abilities, so that if you ever ran out of magic, you could still have type advantages through your abilities. I thought that was so cool because obviously they gave Yuffie something like that in the Intergrade DLC. But to me, I was like, you can't make her that much more OP than the rest of the party. And I love the way they solved for that. That all these characters had these abilities they could unlock that was like very soft magic. So that again, if you were in a battle, and again, when people play on hard mode, this will especially be useful, that you could still access those type advantages, despite the fact maybe you're low on MP, reserving MP, or completely out of MP to begin with. By the way, our drink of the stream, our drink of the episode, is out of the Naruto mug, and we're drinking some matcha, baby. We're drinking some matcha. But something else, too, that I particularly loved about Cloud, and I want to talk about some of the other characters as well, but that I particularly loved about Cloud, I loved Punisher mode. Now, I felt at the very beginning that Punisher mode for Cloud felt a little off. I liked the new animation, the sort of like side-to-side juggle of the enemy. But it all made sense when you unlock Prime mode, which enhances Punisher mode, that gets played into the whole strategy of using your ATB on abilities to access a leveled up bird. Like, for you DBZ fans out there, it felt like Kaioken Punisher mode, which, again, was so much fun. When we think about, Aerith, Tifa, Barrett too, I really enjoyed a lot of the new sort of abilities they added to them, not just the ones that have the, how would you say, the magic affinity attached to them, but it seemed like in a lot of ways, and I liked their quote-unquote sphere grid. I don't care. I'm calling it a sphere grid. I felt like the abilities that were spread out amongst the cast, particularly the remake cast, not even getting to the new characters, it made you want to strategize more, which I feel was so important. Because as much fun as action and hack and slash can feel, when I play Final Fantasy, I want to feel like I'm strategizing. To me, I think that's an integral part of the series. And it's not that the action games and action RPGs can't have that, but it's a tall order to really, because again, you're always strategizing in an action game to a degree, but if you can make me feel like I'm strategizing as much as I would in a turn-based game, then I feel like you've captured something special. And in my opinion, that's what the Rebirth combat captures, is you have that calculating thinking of turn-based combat, but the high adrenaline, high stakes action feeling of an action RPG. And again, Remake was going for that, but I think when it came to the strategy portion, Remake fell short a little bit. But with Rebirth, I think they found that Goldilocks zone. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, to hold it, it is like Kaioken. It really is. Prime mode is like Kaioken Punisher mode. I'm telling you. By the way, I was bringing up earlier that FF7 was such an integral part of my life that other than Pokemon, it was like the first RPG I played. A big part of that was because it gave me Akira Toriyama vibes. Because back then, that's all I really knew, you know? So it was a big deal for me. Big deal for me. Anyway, let's talk about the remake elephant in the room when it came to the combat. The aerial combat was so much better. That's the other thing. Giving Cloud a projectile attack? Like, that's the thing, man. That's the thing. Yeah, I just, in particular, in Remake, I kind of got a little bit tired of using Cloud because I felt like his moveset was among the most basic in Remake. But in Rebirth, Cloud to me was the most fun to play as. Cloud to me was the most fun to play as. I would say in Remake, Tifa was the most fun to play as. Everybody likes a good beat 'em up. But to me in Rebirth, everything they did to Cloud's moveset, phenomenal. Phenomenal. Not only that, you know, we're seeing some Red 13 combat on the screen right now. What I love so much about how they handled characters like Red 13, like Yuffie, like Kate Sith, is they made them handle very different from the remake cast and gave them very special abilities. Like Red 13's Vengeance mode? Come on, dude. Talk about the adrenaline spike of body slamming a man. Come on. I love it. I love it. Let's chime in with the chat a little bit. Let me see what you guys are saying. Lan says, I see people doing wild shit with MP over HP. That's the other thing, too. And I guess, you know what, Lance, you got me there. You got me there. And this is why I involve the chat. This is what makes the Land, I mean this, guys. You guys in the chat make the Lodge special. Just for these kind of reasons. But anyway, that's the other thing, too. I felt like the materia that was added in this game brought like a whole new level. A whole new level. Like, there's such, I don't know, like swapping HP and MP, things like that. The summons, too. The summon materia? Oh, my Lord. Talk about fun. Especially Titan. I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Titan summon. Bit of a soft spot for the Titan summon. All right. Let's switch on over to here for a bit. I'm going to pull up another chapter. Because I do want to keep talking about the combat. And I want to talk about boss battles in particular. And by the way, we are going to talk a little FF16 today. I definitely want to talk FF16. Because I think it's... And I want to compare them endearingly. I'm not going to be one of those, like... one's better than the other. Because I think it's a matter of preference. And we'll definitely discuss that. But... let's talk boss battles. I want to talk about boss battles. Because I think boss battles are when combat systems get to flourish. At the end of the day. Mob fights are cool. I mean, look, to me, this is as true. This is as true for Final Fantasy VII as it is Final Fantasy XVI, as it is Kingdom Hearts 3, as it is Nier Automata. The fact of the matter is, the boss battles are and should be where the combat really gets to shine. You know? And I think Rebirth especially does a good job. Especially does a good job. Josh Z, good to see you here, man. Pillsbury says, please just give a heads up before you get into story spoilers territory. Absolutely. Pillsbury, we're talking, I'm going to keep everything on screen is going to be within the first 4 chapters. But the first half of this podcast, we're pretty much talking all gameplay because to me, I think that's the most important and the best part of this game is gameplay, combat exploration, and the like. So don't worry. There will be a massive warning before we get into spoiler territory. I'm not trying to do that to anybody. We're not going to talk about the ending until the end of this episode. And I definitely want to talk about that. Another disclaimer I suppose I'll make, guys, is we're going to do an entire episode on the ending because that ending requires a good 2 to 3 hours to itself. So don't worry. We'll discuss the ending a little bit here today, particularly my thoughts about it. But we're going to break it down and go in on the ending itself probably at some point next week. But right now, not so much. But we will touch on it. Anyway, let's talk about the boss battles. I'm glad this just pulled up because I enjoyed literally every single fight with the Turks in this game. Every single fight with the Turks. So anyway, getting into the boss battles of it all. So to me, Rebirth, don't get me wrong, I really like fighting basic enemies. But to me, it's these one-on-ones with the humanoid characters where the combat shines the most. Don't get me wrong, it's cool. The boss battles where you're fighting big mechs and big monsters, that's all well and good. That's cool. But to me, I think the best bosses are when you're fighting other humans. The Turks especially stand out. That's why I decided to pull this one up here. You know, every, how do I put it? You know, every fight with Roche, any fight with Sephiroth, remake and alike, like all those fights against other humans are clearly where this combat shines the most. And first of all, I thought the Turks were amazing in this game. And you could tell the devs absolutely adore the Turks. Give me 1 sec. I got to finish this matcha before it gets cold. Okay, there we go. So anyway, I like the boss battles because, for one, I like what you're seeing on the screen right now. These high-pressure situations where you have a boss who's like charging for an attack, and you got to try and stagger them before they unleash that attack. That rush of run it up while they're charging, man, that's the kind of stuff I show up for. Also, we're going to touch on the soundtrack before we get into story, but I do want to say in terms of gameplay, I love what a smooth, how would you put it? A smooth, harmonious relationship the soundtrack and the gameplay have. That if the gameplay is soft and slow, the soundtrack, like if you're in the open field, the soundtrack will reflect that. And then if you hop right into a battle, oftentimes it won't just initiate a battle theme, it'll initiate the battle theme or a version of that softer overworld that you were listening to before. So this way that they married gameplay and soundtrack, and they're always married to a degree, but the fact that they're married moment to moment based on what the player is deciding to do in this open world is just another level of the gameplay that I think elevates this game above so many others within the industry right now. Ooh, that was a rant. But I mean that. That's the kind of stuff that I think it's not the standard right now, but I'd be willing to bet 10 years from now, that kind of relationship with the soundtrack and the gameplay will be standard, especially in games that involve exploring any kind of world or map. Now again, from a game design perspective, a lot of these boss battles are genius. Multiple phases. What I did like that I thought they very much improved on, it would drive me nuts in Remake. You would be running up damage, then you'd use like a limit break like Tifa is right now, but if you hit them past a certain point, bam, it initiated like a mid-battle cutscene, and your limit break was wasted. I hope I explained that well enough. I'm sure people who have played Remake know what I'm talking about, where you're running up damage, you use a limit break, but because you ran it up to a certain point, the limit break kind of cancels. That could happen to you in Rebirth under certain circumstances, but I found it only happened to me one or twice, as opposed to Remake, where I feel like it happened in every single fight, like the Hell House, like every single fight. But in Rebirth, not only did they avoid that situation way more altogether, you would notice that, like, if you staggered an enemy when you were in the middle of running up damage, it would show you a, like, cancel circle, letting you know, like, hey, anything you do now is not going to run up the damage. But what you can do is run up the stagger. Excuse me. So that's one thing I loved in this game, was that if you did damage them to a point a cutscene would initiate, they're not going to let you senselessly run up damage anymore. They give you an indicator, and you can switch to running up stagger, healing up your team. Like, it created these new windows of the combat so that the game didn't have to interrupt the flow. Because that would interrupt a lot of the flows of battle in Remake 2, was you would be in the flow, feeling it, and the next thing you know, bam, it initiated on you. This game at least gives you, like, a little bit of a heads up of like, hey, when this guy recovers from the pressure, we're going to initiate a second phase. But that you could run up the stagger or heal up your team in that window of time. To me, I thought that was so good. I thought that was so good, so well handled. And yeah, overall, I thought that was cool. I'm trying to think, because we're almost 30 minutes in now, and I definitely want to make time for all things, because there's a lot more to this gameplay than just the combat, but I want to make sure. Oh no, you know what I haven't discussed is the synergy attacks. And let's wind this back. Let's wind this back over here. The synergy attacks. Now, we all knew from the DLC for Remake that synergy attacks were going to be coming to Rebirth, obviously. They were quick to show them off in the trailers. But my lord, they were such a joy. Such a joy to use and play. And again, added new levels of strategy. Like, if an enemy was charging up a special attack, to me, that was the perfect time to use a synergy attack. And then while the two characters doing the synergy attack are attacking, you switch to the third character and you heal up, or you cast barrier, or you cast all these other things. I think this game's combat shines when you're able to set two characters in motion and then control one character and let all the pieces fall into place. Stuff like that. And the synergy attacks are perfect for that, because you can allocate action to two characters at once so that you could focus on either like, one thing I would love to do is let a synergy attack between Cloud and Tifa run, and while that's distracting the enemy, Barrett charges up his overcharge, baby. He creates a perfect win. Just, again, I could rant about different things I did with that all day. You get the point. The point is, that aspect was very much improved. I thought the magic system was better in this one. I liked that, how do I put it? You know, the magic, if there's anything that hasn't changed much since Remake, in my opinion, the magic system mostly stayed the same. It just seemed to me like it was more important. I felt like Remake, with the exception of Hell House, you really could get away with hack and slashing through a good amount of that game, at least on normal mode. In Rebirth, there's no way you're getting out of this game without understanding the magic system in its fullest, which is something that I thought was cool. Again, not a lot of change in the magic system between Remake to Rebirth, but Rebirth definitely makes you more reliant on that magic system to progress, especially in certain battles. Okay. Let's see. Turks are so cool, says Mirror. Turks are the best. You gotta love the Turks. And I think they're gonna be crazy important in part 3, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, let me find another window of combat here that I could talk during, because now I want to share. You know, I gushed about the combat for a good while there. I want to actually share some of my criticisms of the combat, because I definitely have some. On one hand, I'll give you my biggest criticism. Here, there's no combat going on here. Let's find us a boss battle, which should be easy. Yep, right over here. Cool. So I'll give that a second to buffer, but here's what we could do. Let me move over here for a minute. So one of my biggest complaints about the combat in general actually would be that a lot of those attacks, a lot of those team attacks were attached to R1. Now, what is R1 used for? Guarding. And let me tell you something. My biggest complaint with the combat and game design was, at least on normal mode, maybe it's different on dynamic. I'm certain it'll be different on hard mode. But normal mode is how 80 to 90% of the player base is going to play this game. Normal mode, you almost never needed to guard. And I think that's a problem. You almost never needed to guard. There were times it was obviously very useful. There were times it was obviously very advantageous. But it was never really necessary. I felt guarding throughout the campaign really was not very necessary. And I felt attaching a lot of those team moves to R1 was a little jarring. And I felt like they did that to encourage guarding more. But I felt like the only times I was guarding was to do those team attacks. So, I don't know. Maybe there's only so many buttons on a PlayStation controller. I don't know. I don't have a solution. But I didn't like that setup. Again, one, I didn't like that. I would like guarding and countering to be a little bit more important in the future, a little bit more necessary and advantageous. But also, some of those team attacks, I think, I don't know, something about tagging them to R1 just didn't quite work for me. Okay, Josh, that's why I'm glad you're here. Josh Z says, I played on dynamic and disagree. I also disagree. Hey, look, that's fair, guys. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I played, but I really felt like you barely needed to guard. Or are you saying you disagree about it being tied to R1? Try to be a little more specific. I don't know if you guys disagree with the attacks being tied to R1 or with the lack of needing to guard. Maybe you disagree with both. But I stand by it. I definitely stand by it, but I want to give y'all a voice. I felt like I never needed to guard. And thus I seldom used the team attacks tied to R1. I'd use them when they were advantageous, obviously. But I got much more wrapped up in the synergy attacks, the special abilities like Vengeance Mode, the new abilities that these characters had. But let me see. Let me see what chat's getting on. So, Dex says, so if I get this right, it seems like the issue is less with the button and more with the difficulty, since I played on dynamic mode too, and I feel like I was guarding a lot. Interesting. Maybe it is a dynamic mode thing. And maybe that tells me I would enjoy it more on dynamic mode. Because I felt like on normal mode, not that you couldn't guard, but I felt like I never really needed to. I felt like I could dodge most things. Okay. Let me think. Some other criticisms for the combat. I think, honestly, as far as combat is concerned, I don't really have many other criticisms other than, for normal mode, reinforce more guarding, maybe a different button layout. I don't know. The truth is, I stand by that the combat is the absolute highlight of this game. Now that the story isn't great, the story is great. Now that the characters aren't amazing, the characters are amazing. Now that the graphics and soundtrack aren't mind-blowing, at times they both can be. But at the end of the day, the combat is the downright highlight of this game. And even with my criticisms, it's great. You see it right here. I have my criticisms, but my chat disagrees. My chat doesn't share those criticisms, which goes to show that this game's combat might be as close to flawless for its audience as it can be. Now, let's see. By the way, I haven't finished Rebirth yet. Then I will give you a major spoiler warning when we get to that point of the episode. But let's switch on over to here. Give me a second, guys, because now I want to talk more gameplay. Now I definitely want to talk more gameplay. Okay. Let's pull this up over here. Because again, there's more to the gameplay than just the combat. So I want to discuss Let me pull it up. Perfect. Exploring the world was awesome. I have to say, there was one thing not that I wasn't looking forward to it, but there was one part of the gameplay I was not going to depend on, and that was going to be this world exploration. However, I found myself pleasantly surprised with how much fun it is to run around this world doing all the tasks. Seriously. So on my first playthrough, it was mostly narratively motivated. So I finished it between 50 and 60 hours. I did maybe a third of the side content. I'm on my second playthrough now, maybe 30 hours into my second playthrough, and I'm 100%ing it. I want to plat this game. I love it so much. Even though I have a lot of criticisms and we're getting to them. Believe me, we're getting to them. Now that the combat is done, we're getting to them. But the world exploration between like the rock climbing and the swimming and the chocobos and the exploring and the landscapes and how pretty and beautiful everything was to look at, it was so much fun and so immersive, which is what you want this world exploration aspect to feel like. So I was completely blown away and continually am. I haven't felt like this since FF14. I will say that. I haven't felt like this since FF14. FF15 didn't capture this for me. Remake didn't capture this for me. Strangers of Paradise didn't capture this for me. Again, I'm strictly talking about FF here. And again, a lot of those games weren't going for it. They weren't going for that. But man, to me, this is the most fun I've had exploring a map since FF10. Really, really. So, they knocked it out of the park. I guess let me do numbers, right? The combat I'm going to give a 10 out of 10, and I don't do that lightly. This game will not be getting a 10 out of 10 as a whole. But the combat, I give a 10 out of 10. On a bad day, 9.5. World exploration, I'm going to give a solid 8.5. There were some parts that were a little barren, but then again, that's kind of standard these days. But the world exploration, not talking side quest, talking literally exploring the world, the swimming, climbing, chocobos, chocobo hunting, that kind of stuff. Hard 8.5 out of 10, man. Seriously, a lot of fun. And I think Final Fantasy needs to go back to that. FF16 didn't do that for me. I love FF16. I really do. One of my favorite in the series. But they didn't capture that either. This made me feel like I was playing an old school Final Fantasy, like a 10, like a 9, 8, 7, where I had this big world and map to explore. So to me, the world exploration here in Rebirth felt like a return to form, and I can only hope the third installment will do it even better. Because there is places to improve. Like, all right. We're going to take a swig. Take a swig for the hardworking men and women at Square Enix. Okay. World exploration stuff that kind of bugged me. For one, the Bronco. I'm not going to pull it up on screen because it's a late chapter. I don't want to risk that. But anytime you're controlling the Bronco is a waste of time. It is a waste of time. When the game was so immersive, from its combat to its mini games to exploring the map, when we finally got a hold of the Bronco, it felt so weak. So there are a few moments like this, not just with the Bronco, but like in the beginning when you're vacuuming up the Mako dust. Like, there are certain points where this game tries to mix up the gameplay and just lands flat. I guess that's the point I'm trying to bring up. Their mix of gameplay overall is very good. Like, the mini games are placed very well. I thought, the Pacing of the narrative is very good. Things like that I thought were very good. It makes for a good gameplay loop. But there are some moments where I'm like, why are you even making me do this? Why am I taking this vacuum and vacuuming up Mako dust? Why am I doing that? Why are you giving me control of this Bronco when all I can do is just like move around the screen? You have this Star Fox-esque mini game at the Golden Saucer that plays very well, but when I actually fly around the map, I don't have any hoops I can fly through. I don't have any enemies or monsters I can shoot down. There's nothing for me to do. I'm literally just controlling it on the screen while the characters have a conversation. I'd rather it was just autopiloted so that I could just focus on the conversation only. And there came a point I literally just put the controller down, let it fly, and listen to the convo. So little moments like that where I'm like, you guys have such good gameplay between your combat, world exploration, side quests, chocobos, transportation. There were some moments I felt like they were really trying hard to mix it up when they really didn't need to. I think they can rely on their core gameplay a little bit more. So that's all I'll say about that. Another criticism I had, I want to pull up the specific thing. I want to pull up the specific visual for this. Let me see. Is it this chapter or is it the next chapter? I think it's the next chapter. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to pull up a visual for you guys to see. But another thing that bugged me was like, aside from hunting chocobos, sometimes they put you in these like stealth missions where there's no like risk of getting caught. It's a scene in Calm. I believe it's chapter 3, might be chapter 2. But there's a scene in Calm where you have to basically, Broden, the guy at the end, is distracting the Shinra troops and you can't get caught. And they make it play like you're in a really stealthy mission, but there's literally zero risk of getting caught. Zero risk. I'm going to pull it up. I think I found it. I think I've got it. 1 second. And it makes like no sense to me. Here we go. Let's pull it. And maybe you guys feel a little different. I don't know. But like this part. What is this? To me, this just felt there were moments like this in the game that feel very awkward to me. Where I'm like, you're making me feel like I'm on a stealth mission, but there's zero risk of getting caught. So what you're essentially doing is making me walk through a cutscene. Like you're regulating my walks. It's I don't know. The game's taking me on a walk. And there are times where that's necessary. Like whenever Cloud is possessed by Genova, or like the limping in Nibelheim, that I get. But there's moments like this where I'm like, you're making me play through a movie. This is a playthrough cinematic. You know? There's no risk, no reward. You're just going through the motions. And when the gameplay is so immersive between its combat, mini games, exploration, this stuff feels like a hiccup. Now again, I maintain the gameplay is a highlight. Gameplay is the highlight. But these are my critiques. Again, I love this game so much. And I critique it because I love it. And it's one of my favorite games in the last 5 years. But I'm critiquing it because I want it to be better part 3. I want part 3 to be damn near perfect. But I'm just pulling up a couple examples here. There are a couple more throughout the game. But between things like the Bronco and these pretend stealth missions, it feels like the game is mixing it up when they don't have to. You know, it felt like you're forcing it. It felt very forced. Right? Which, when you have that vibe in Remake, it fits. But in Rebirth, which is a game that feels very free and open, it didn't quite work. So, that would probably be my biggest complaint on the gameplay, is that there's times they mix it up when they really don't need to. Rely on your core gameplay. And I think that's a Square Enix issue more than anything. Because I think that's, for you Kingdom Hearts fans out there, I think that's a big weakness in Kingdom Hearts 3. I love Kingdom Hearts 3. It's my favorite in the series. But too many times they try to mix it up when they should just rely on their core gameplay, which is awesome. But anyway, a little overkill. Exactly, Lance. Exactly. It's just a little bit overkill. Okay. Let's move on here. Let's talk. Got one more gameplay thing I really want to discuss. Okay. I'm going to be pulling up Chapter 6, which is when they go to Costa del Sol. There won't be any serious spoilers here. But if you're trying not to get spoiled on Chapter 6, Costa del Sol, just going to give you the heads up now. But I want to talk about it. I feel we have to talk about it. Okay, hold on. I have been neglecting Twitch this whole time. And Jip rated us 25 minutes ago. Thank you. Sharded Visua with the follow. Okay. Not Star Fox, you mean Gummy Ship, says Knock Flugel. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. All right. Let me get back to where I was. Oh, did we go offline on Twitch? We might have. No, we didn't. We're chilling. My thing's just being stupid. Okay, let's get back into it here. Let's pull up Costa del Sol. That's definitely what I want to be talking about. Let it rip. Let me tell you another big strength. There's another huge strength in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that I hope sets the standard for RPGs. Towns. Would minigames count as gameplay? Absolutely. And we're going to talk about it. I want to talk towns. Oh, we're going to talk Queen's Blood. But I want to talk towns. Towns. Why do I say this? Because to me, towns have become such a lost art in modern RPGs when, the history of RPGs, the foundation of RPGs was how fun it was to go to all these different towns. Like in the early Final Fantasies. Dragon Quests are like that too. I feel like so often now, even Pokemon, guys, just to bring up another RPG. Very basic one, albeit, but a game that lives and breathes on its towns. You're giving us this whole world you want me to run around in. I want to feel like every time I reach a pit stop, I'm in a new world of culture. And this is something I cannot express enough. Rebirth does fantastic. I'm going to give the towns. I'm going to gush about them, but I'm going to be very forward about this. The towns in Rebirth, I'm giving them a 9.5 out of 10. Okay? Combat is a 10. Towns are 9.5. At world exploration is 8.5. The towns, to me, are living, breathing. The NPCs are fantastic. The conversations they have, the things you can eavesdrop on, the way they interact with you based on what you're doing, phenomenal. The culture that every one of these towns has really makes it feel like you're in a real place. Like when I'm in Costa del Sol, I feel like I'm in Hawaii or West Coast Florida. When I'm in Calm, I feel like I'm in the Netherlands or Amsterdam. Whenever I'm in Midgar, I feel like I'm in one of the bad New York City neighborhoods. This game does it so well, and I feel like it's a lost art. I really do. I think when I think this game, it blows so many other RPGs I've played out of the water when it comes to these towns. more than the Nier games, more than modern Final Fantasies, including 14. You guys know I will gush about 14 till I'm dead. But Rebirth does towns better than 14, and that's something 14 does exceptionally well. That's something 14 does exceptionally well. But Rebirth does it even better. 16 did a pretty good job. 16 did a pretty good job. But Rebirth does it even better. Does it even better with the towns. And part of the towns is going to be the side quests. The side quests are fun. The side quests are fun. And there's a great balance between fetch quests, combat quests, exploration and discovery quests, excavation quests, mini-game quests. There's such a nice widespread of gameplay among the side quests in these towns that, again, it's not just the immersiveness, the culture, the NPCs, but the side quests too. It's remarkable. It's like, I never wanted to leave a town except for Corel. But it's only because they were treating my boy Barrett like shit. But wherever I was, even when I was in under Junon was great. And above Junon, where the parade was with the infantry, like all of it was so... I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to leave any of these towns. Gongaga was cool to be in. I don't know, man. This is one I don't have a criticism. I don't. If someone in the chat has a criticism for the towns, by all means. Jay Weezy says, just dropping by to give my support. I just started my own gameplay for Rebirth, so I'm going to hop off the vid. Keep up the great content. Jay Weezy, thanks for dropping in. Sage, we love you. And enjoy the game. Love the Junon Republic lore. Oh, we're going to get into that when we get to story, lore, and characters. We're almost there. We're almost there. We're going to get into that. But again, when it comes to towns, I have no criticisms. None. If someone in the chat has a criticism for the towns, let me know. Because I feel bad not having a criticism. Like, one thing, I guess. But it's not a criticism. I would just want more. Me wanting more is not a criticism. So, I'm not going with that. Okay. Let's briefly discuss the soundtrack. Okay, I want to get off gameplay. We've talked about gameplay for almost an hour, about 45 minutes now. So let's get off gameplay. I want to talk about soundtrack, graphics, and then we're going to talk story and characters. But for now, look, I talked about the soundtrack, how it... Oh, I didn't talk much about minigames, but I loved the minigames. There's not much more I could say. The minigames were fun, especially the piano minigames. I love the piano minigames. But let's get back into the soundtrack. Look, guys, you know how I feel about any Square Enix soundtrack. They're all phenomenal. Soundtrack is another one. I have no complaints. But Square Enix could drop the biggest dog shit game of the century, and the soundtrack will still be a banger. Soundtrack will still be a banger. This soundtrack is no different. I think it's better than the remake soundtrack. I really do. I think it's better than the remake soundtrack. And I think... I don't know, like, what else can... I don't have much else to say about the soundtrack. It's a beautiful soundtrack. I love the way it correlates with the gameplay. I love that you have, like, 9 versions of every song. Like, I must have heard, no joke, 6 or 7 different, like, Yuffie themes. Like, I think that's what I liked, was there were so many different arrangements of different themes and different tracks that it made the soundtrack sound so fresh. So, you know, hats off to them, man. They knocked it out of the park. They always do. I guess the next thing we can discuss is the graphics. This is another one I don't want to touch too much on because the graphics look fantastic. At the end of the day, they look great. The textures are much better than they were in Remake. There were still some rough textures here or there. There were some... Excuse me. There were some performance issues here and there as well. They patched a few of those up today. But overall, graphics-wise, there's nothing to complain about. These are the best looking characters I've ever seen on screen. Seriously. These are the best looking character models I've ever seen on screen. So I don't have complaints for that. The environments look stunning. Stunning. And again, performance-wise, it plays very well on the PS5. I am curious to see how good it looks when it comes to PC. Excuse me. Lands of Master says, some remixes felt overproduced, but still peak. Yeah, 100%. If I were to critique the soundtrack, I'd say there were times it feels overproduced, but better for something to feel overproduced than underproduced, I suppose. Okay. All right. Again, I don't want to touch too much on those. Because again, I think the soundtrack is a huge win. What do you call it? Soundtrack is a huge win. The graphics are beautiful. There's little places where they could get better, but as far as industry standard, both the soundtrack and the graphics are completely up to speed, up to par. I'd give the graphics a solid 9. I'd give the soundtrack a solid 9. I think the only thing I would critique about the soundtrack is I wanted to hear more character themes. There was a lot of it, but I don't know. I felt like it could have been more. I feel like there could have been more. Anyway, let's, I think it's time. I think it's time. Let me put up a big spoiler warning. Let me put up a big spoiler warning in the chat. We have gone spoiler mode. We are going spoiler mode, ladies and gentlemen. Let me pin this. Let me pin this. Let me pin this. Oh boy, that backfired. It's not letting me pin it. Are you kidding me? What are you good for? All right, give me a sec. Let me do this like manually, like over here. Pin the message. Okay, we have gone spoiler mode. We're going spoiler mode. We're going spoiler mode. Because I want to talk about the story. I want to talk lore. I want to talk about the ending. Definitely. But let's talk. Yo, Spacely is here. Soundtrack 10 out of 10 because bow wow wow. It's hard for me to give something a 10 out of 10. It's hard. I gave it to the combat because I really feel like it's cutting edge. But let's talk. Let's talk lore. Let's talk story. It's time. It's time. Let's keep it soft for now. I don't want to get into the ending just yet. But I do want to discuss a few things. Adonai says, lots of feelings and opinions out there, but I can agree the end stuff with Aerith confuses most people, takes the grief out of... Yeah, so we'll get to that. We will most certainly get to that. We will most certainly get to that. But here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to get into the specifics, and we'll talk about certain things, but I'm really just reviewing it here. We're going to have plenty of podcasts where we can talk super in-depth on story, super in-depth on lore, super in-depth on that ending. But I want to keep it, for the most part, relatively brief. I am going to play a cutscene later, but I think that'll be the only one. But let's talk about this. Look, guys, here's what I'm going to say. I felt that, I'll word it like this. I think if you compare Rebirth to the original Final Fantasy VII, I would actually say that the characters and character arcs in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are superior to that of the original Final Fantasy VII. However, the plot of the original Final Fantasy VII is better than the plot of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now again, Rebirth is a divided plot. It's one half of a whole. So it's not that surprising. for me to hold this opinion. But to me, I feel that where in FF7 the plot is stronger than the character arcs, I feel in Rebirth it's inverted. That the characters and character arcs are now the strength of the narrative, and the overall plot is secondary, as opposed to the original where that's flipped. So for those who maybe I'm confusing, what do I mean by this? So when I say overall plot, I mean Sephiroth and Jenova versus Aerith and the planet, with the backdrop of an apocalypse, Shinra, Hojo's experiments, that whole thing unfolding, Jenova and the Ancients. That's the plot. That's the overarching plot. Character arcs are the individual journeys that these characters are on, right? Without getting too much into it, right? Barrett had to confront his past. So all the things that happened with him in Corel, that's his character arc. That's his individual story. So again, I feel like Rebirth does the characters and their arcs stronger and the plot kind of in the back seat, whereas the original, I think that's inverted. But again, I know I'm repeating myself, but just want to make it clear, I also understand that Rebirth is half of a whole, right? Because remake is a full arc. It's a full plot, right? It's not something that needs to be divided in two parts. Remake from start to finish is a full story and plot in and of itself, whereas Rebirth is clearly being split in two between itself and its successor, rather sequel. Let's swig down some water. So again, not knocking it, but I felt that Rebirth's plot minus, hear me out, minus Zack, and yeah, as you're saying on Twitch, So White, the interactions between characters added a lot. The character interactions in Rebirth, peak fiction. Character interactions in Rebirth, peak, absolute peak. Again, let's where was I? Okay, so minus everything going on with Zack and the ending, the plot of Rebirth is actually painfully simple. And I think that's actually a good thing. I think it's a good decision. But honestly, the plot of Rebirth is very simple. The main party are following the hooded figures around the planet. Why did we go to Corel? Why did we go to this town? Because the hooded guys are there. Why did we go to that town? Because the hooded guys are there. Why are we going to that town? Because the hooded guys are there. That is 80 to 90% of the plot. Like, it's really not hard to follow. But again, I think that's smart. Keep the base level plot as simple as you can so that the more complicated things are easier to digest. They don't require as much bandwidth. Now, as opposed to remake, where there was more of a rhyme or reason why the characters were doing what they were doing, going where they were going. Remake, there was more depth into what moved our characters between A to B. In Rebirth, that was very simple. It was just the hooded figures. Now, in the third installment, I'm begging for that to be different. It should be, given the original and what's coming. But in Rebirth, it was very simple. Simplicity isn't always bad. Not at all, Zane. And I think when it comes to their basic plot, it's a good decision, in my opinion. Lindsey Brown says, I love how you can track the story against the OG and compare the differences in Sephiroth's interference with Cloud's inner monologue. Yeah, that's the thing too, is they kept it very true to the original. Like, the plot in Rebirth was very similar, and the order in which we went to places ended up being pretty similar. There were some things that were different, but for the most part, was pretty similar. So again, when it comes to the plot, let's talk about the narrative as a whole, the strength of the narrative, character and character arcs, the weak part of the narrative, my opinion, the overarching plot. But that's not a bad thing. I think that's how this game had to be. Now, again, I think these are the strongest iterations of these characters we've ever seen. Their interactions are very genuine, very believable. The way Barret and Yuffie clash is great. I would have preferred to see Tifa and Yuffie clash a little more like they did in the original, but that's okay. There was a lot. How do I put this? Despite the simplicity of the plot, there was a lot to enjoy about the simplicity of the plot. Because again, I think it made it easier to digest these other moments. And I think what was good is that you had a lot of the Zack stuff going on, right? But they didn't do too much. They didn't do too much of it. Like, overall, it was just a few minutes here, a few minutes there, until we got towards the ending where they decided to ramp that up a little bit. Let me move us to another chapter for the backdrop. Let me move us to another chapter for the backdrop. Okay. Let's bump this up. Oh God, no, not chapter 5. Much as I love chapter 5. And I do love me some chapter 5. You better believe it. Just let me pull up another one. Okay. There we go. Let's get to some cutscenes. Although I think this is mostly like a little journey to Corel. But anyway, I was getting off track there. I think the reason it was good for the plot to be simple, even though it's a bit of a critique of mine, I would like to see the plot elevated in the next part. But I think what was good about the plot remaining simple was that it allowed these character arcs to thrive in that way, right? Like when everything that happened between Barret and Dyne takes place, you're able to really zone in and focus on it because there isn't too much going on in the overarching plot just yet. So to me, I thought that was a very, very wise decision on their part. Let's see. Let's pull this up too. Chapter 9. Because I believe this is when we go to Gongaga. Which I thought that was one spot that was very different from the original, but I thought was handled so well. Like so masterfully well. So again, when it comes to these characters, their interactions and their individual arcs, brilliant. Really, it doesn't get much better than that, especially in the world of Final Fantasy VII. And there's a lot of installments in this series. But these characters are at their best in Rebirth. I mean, Tifa especially. Tifa was a character who I felt she was very much in the backseat in Remake. She didn't even have an arc in Remake. But in Rebirth, she steals the show in so many ways. In so many ways, Tifa, Lockhart, and Cloud steal the show. I felt like in Remake, Barret and Aerith stole the show. But in Rebirth, to me, it's Cloud and Tifa. Really, really steal the show. I forgot to talk about Queen's Blood. Just know that I love Queen's Blood and think it's genius. I don't need to get too much on it. Just know that I love Queen's Blood. Moving on. Gongaga was land service. Dude, Cisne, the best Turk, and she always will be. But, again, I would like to see the plot get a little bit, have more depth in the next one. I don't want it to be, we're just following the hooded guys around, and they're the reason we're in places A, B, and C. But the character interactions and arcs, keep at it. Don't keep at it. Just keep going in the direction you're going in. So yeah, I guess from here it's time. I suppose it's time to talk about the final 2 chapters. Oh, actually, I do have a critique. I have a major critique. Major critique, and we're looking at them. I would give the characters and their the interactions, their character arcs, even though not a lot of their character arcs are finished, a lot of their character arcs are cut halfway. You have to understand that going in. There's no way. That's the other thing, guys. Whoever you watch review this, whoever you watch talk about this, there is no analyzing this plot and these character arcs without understanding this is one half of the equation. What you're getting is a story that's interrupted at its midway point. And that's part of the reason the ending feels the way it does, is because this game wraps up at a midpoint. Josh Z with a $20 super chat coming in here says, in my opinion, the devs want Cloud to question not just his past, but the nature of reality. And Aerith is also intentional because it just adds to the issue of Cloud's psyche, which was the devs' favorite thing in OG. The ending serves that. 100%. We're going to get into the ending. We're going to absolutely get into the ending. Thank you for that $20 super chat, by the way. Can we get some love in the chat for Josh Z and Mirror Limit throwing some super chats on us today? Thank you, guys. You guys are the best. Now, we're going to talk about our boy Sid. But I don't want to talk about him yet because I need to refill my water because it's dry. The well is dry. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. And by commercial, I mean you get to take my dog on a virtual walk. But I'm going to go refill this water. We're going to talk about Sid, and then we're going to get to the final chapters. And don't get me wrong, guys, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll be right back. And yes, Josh is a legend. Okay, we are back. We're going to be talking a little bit more on the characters, and then we're going to talk about those final 2 chapters, which I am very excited to talk about. But let's get ourselves set up here. All right, look. I didn't want to be right. Didn't want to be. But I will say, I was disappointed. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every minute this Sid was on screen. I want to make that clear. They made him very enjoyable. I like that he's like the crazy uncle, right? He's like the crazy uncle who the check engine light's on in his car, but he's taking you and the boys to the park anyway. So, let me make that clear. I did enjoy him. However, this is not the Sid from the original Final Fantasy VII, and that makes me very upset because all of these characters, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Yuffie, Aerith, Kate Sith, Vincent. A little too early to say this about Vincent, but everyone I just mentioned, this is them at their best. That's why I love Rebirth so much, because these characters have been with me my whole life, and this game was Cloud at his best, Tifa at her best, Yuffie at her best, Nanaki at his best. This game, if not this trilogy, is so many of these characters I grew up with brought to life and more fulfilled and manifested than ever before. But it's sad that won't be true for Sid, because this is just a different character. Now look, maybe we go to Rocket Town in part 3 and the real Sid shows up. But it appears to me his edges got softened. Yeah, see, S.O. White, I like this idea. He was on his best behavior in front of Ifalna's daughter, but like, the Sid of OGFF7 wouldn't care. I don't know. Look, I've said my piece a million times about Sid on this show, but I'll just say it again. I love that in OGFF7, he's a piece of shit. You meet him and he's a piece of shit. He's a drunk. He's abusive. He's a mess. But by the end of the game, he's transformed. And then in Advent Children, he's naming his new airship after Shira. That transformation means something to me. It's beautiful to watch. But if we meet him and he's like this, what am I watching him transform into? Now again, maybe in part 3 we go to Rocket Town, he relapses and goes nuts, and he sees Shira, he goes crazy. Maybe. But there was no cigarette. He was very polite. He was helpful. I don't know. Again, I think even though the combat is the highlight, the plot and narrative is sitting at number 2. The characters are the highlight of the narrative, but he is the weakest link. He is the weakest link. For whatever reason, I don't know why, they decided to soften him. Here's what I'm going to say. I hope their decision to soften Sid was a genuine change that came from the devs. What I hope this wasn't was that somebody in a Square Enix department, be it the admin department, the ethics department, the fucking whatever department that isn't the developers, what isn't the writers. What would bother me was that if this change happened because one of them knocked on Nojima's door and basically said, hey, we can't have that in this game. That would upset me. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying if that is what happened, it would upset me. And until I'm told otherwise, I'm going to assume this was a decision by the devs and by the writers. But I want answers. And I want an explanation why they did this. Because everybody else in this cast got to be their true selves, their OG FF7 selves, amplified and manifested at a scale we've never seen before. But they made a deliberate change with Sid, and I just want answers. I'm not a fan of the change. It's not a deal breaker for me. It did not hurt my experience. Let me make that clear. But it is a criticism I have. Because I wanted to see the OG Sid here, and I wanted to see him go through that transformation. That's all. That's all. Let me see. Mirror Limit says, I heard people say it's probably a new business personality since we are paying him for travel, and I hope it's true and not him getting his character and growth ruined. You know, I'm at the point where I'm going to assume that he's just a different character, that it's just a different Sid. This is Sid Light. You know? Sid Light. It's my only criticism among the cast. Vincent was incredible. Okay, Vincent. Man, they got me to like Kate Sith. They got me to thoroughly love having Kate Sith on screen. That's what I mean where I'm like, every character has been knocked out of the park and is getting treatment like the treatment they deserve. It's just sad that Sid's not one of them. That said, I did really enjoy his time on screen. I did. But now let's move to some of the fun stuff. Chapter 13. Oh, this is Chapter 13. So Chapter 13, I will say, is the best chapter for exploring and doing side quests and everything like that. But boy, oh boy, did Chapter 13 start to shake things up. Okay. Oh, shit. Ooh, what's going on? We went to the channel. That is not what we wanted. There we go. Okay, now we can run it. Let's see here. See, here's the Bronco again. Although the Bronco at sea was actually more fun than in the air. Okay, I want to talk about Temple of the Ancients. I definitely want to talk about this temple. We're at 720p, good. So, I didn't want to bring this up during gameplay or some of the stuff we were reviewing earlier, because it could be a little spoilery. Let me tell you something. A criticism I had about the gameplay, I felt like the puzzles were too simple for too long. The puzzles were too simple for too long. We were in like chapter 11 and we were doing puzzles at the same skill level as chapter 2. So that's a gameplay criticism I have that I didn't bring up earlier. That the puzzles, the difficulty spike didn't really happen until chapter 13. Now, let me say this, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say this. Temple of the Ancients was the best Zelda dungeon I've played in the last 7 or 8 years. What do I mean by that? How do I put this? So for one, I'm taking a shot at Zelda for getting rid of their traditional dungeon design. That's one. 2, and I love Zelda. Please don't get it twisted. I love Breath of the Wild. I love Tears of the Kingdom. Please don't get that twisted. But this temple was a joy. This temple was a joy to go through. Seriously, I got from FF7 Rebirth what I've wanted from the Zelda series for like ever. Now, given it's not traditional like Zelda dungeon design, but it felt more like a traditional Zelda dungeon than anything we've gotten in the Switch era. Now, me and my personal pot shots aside, this was remarkably fun. This Temple of the Ancients segment was remarkably fun. And I thought their take on Temple of the Ancients here, which was very different from the original, was a great way to conceptualize the live stream and really made this place feel like It was a home to the ancients. Because when you play OG FF7, you go to Temple of the Ancients. I like it. It gets the job done, especially for the time it's in, but it feels pretty flat. It doesn't feel like a special place, really. It just feels like another location. Here in Rebirth, they made the home of the ancients, Temple of the Ancients, they made this feel like you were somewhere else. And I think that's a good touch. I know this is probably where some people are like, hey, this is differentiating, but I think that's a great touch. Personally. Dex Holder Fred says, I love how they did Temple of the Ancients, even if it went on for like 5 hours. I did not mind. Especially because the last chapter is pretty quick compared to the others. But I really thought this was a nice touch. I don't know if there's anything else I really want to talk about with the temple. I did want to touch on it because I did think this was a really fun portion of the game. And it made me... I like it when you can make me feel like I'm at the end of the game. You know, I could feel it in the gameplay itself. The Turks battles were great in this chapter, I will say. Oh, geez, happened again. Cut that out. The Turks battles in this chapter were fantastic. Also, I'm sorry, I have to pull it up. We're gonna watch this scene, actually. We're gonna watch another scene later, but I want to watch this scene because I actually love it.
It's not a temple.
As the temple went on, I wanted to slap Cloud in the face more and more. Let me tell you something. This trilogy is doing more for Cloud than anybody else. In the original, I actually feel like Cloud can be a weak link at times. I actually think Cloud is the best character in this trilogy. And again, I've loved the character Cloud my whole life, but I do feel like he's one of the weaker links in OG, but he is the strength of this trilogy, and I love that.
Temple, it's a fortress. To defend against what, though? Fiends?
Worse, humans. Humans feared and coveted the power of the ancient.
I hate that it keeps doing that. My man takes it through the ribs. I love that they have this nice little scene. They make it seem like he's gonna fucking die.
Always did take my word for it.
Here we go.
I never hated you, you know.
I legit thought Sung was gonna die. I legit thought he was gonna die.
This pedestal's a key. One only an ancient can use.
Where
My
are you
man
going?
just gets up and goes back to work.
A report to make.
Employee of the freaking month, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to play that. Okay. I had to. Let's move this along. I think we can move on to chapter 14. Because there was one thing I really wanted to touch on with the ending before we get to the big stuff. Okay, like for instance, this scene was very good. Let me mute this. We don't need to play it. But I thought this scene was very good between Cloud and Aerith. The way Cloud is like desperately pining for the materia. Like, man, powerful stuff. But let me move us to the final chapter. Again, guys, we're going to talk. Don't worry. We'll have plenty of podcasts about FF7. We're going to have an entire podcast about the ending itself. So don't worry. But with this being kind of just like my review of it, I just want to give my raw thoughts. And believe me, I still have plenty to say. Just give me a minute as I pull up what I believe to be like a key scene that I think people could benefit from watching multiple times. So we're going to watch this particular scene once I find it. I did have it pulled up, but then I lost it. Yeah, I think it's earlier than that. Give me 1 second here. This. Okay, bear with me, guys. Yes, here we go. Perfect. Okay. We're going to watch this scene together. The scene where Sephiroth basically explains a lot of the plot and what's going on. Because I do believe a lot of this has been... Umbra's here. What's up, Umbra? Sung is a get-it-done kind of man. Sure is. I want to offer my interpretation of what this scene is telling the audience, because I've seen a lot of different interpretations of what Sephiroth means here. So I'm going to let this play and kind of just give my take on how I'm interpreting this. And I'm curious, chat, what you think. Here we go.
Behold, the true nature of reality.
Here we go. He let you know right away. Lord Dump was coming.
When the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born.
Okay, when the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born. We're going to break this down. I'm not going to do... Again, I'm going to do a whole episode that breaks down and analyzes this ending to a T. This is just a little snippet of what's to come on another episode. But I think for me to accurately review this plot and its ending and give my honest thoughts, you need to know how I interpret this. So, when the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born. So a consequence of the party killing fate or severing off from fate in the original game is the birth of these new worlds. Now, keep in mind what this is telling us is that there is a prime world, a prime line, let's call it, not a timeline. Let's call it a prime line. That's the world these characters are in. And as a consequence of them breaking fate in this prime line, new worlds are born from this world. We'll get more into that. Let's let good old Sephi keep going.
The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding.
Okay. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding. I see people talking multiverse in the chat. I've got to be honest. I'm open to being wrong, but I think people who think this is multiverse, you have it wrong. I think you have it wrong. That's not what's going on here. I'm going to explain it as best I can. But the planet encompasses a multitude of worlds ever unfolding. The planet encompasses those worlds. Those worlds stem from the planet, live off the planet. They're all the different worlds that appear are based on this prime line. Okay, I'm not going to call it a timeline. Prime line. And the planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, meaning if it was an alternate universe, then it would be an alternate planet. It wouldn't be this planet. So the planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, not a multitude of universes cultivate a multitude of planets. The planet is, Sephiroth is rooting this in the planet. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds. We're going to keep this going. He explains it further. It's not multiverse. That's not my interpretation. We'll keep this going because multiverse would mean a whole other universe, which would mean that there's like infinite Sephiroths, infinite clouds. But that's not what's going on. I'll be able to explain it. We'll keep it going.
Some quickly perish, while others endure.
Okay. Some quickly perish, while others endure. He's going to explain a little bit more of that. Hold on.
Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade.
Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade. So here's the thing. If you have alternate timelines, for example, let's say the world of FF7 It's been 2,000 years since Genova crashed. So in an alternate timeline, right, if you had this alternate universe, they would be starting from the same beginning of time. They'd have that same starting point. But what Sephiroth is getting at when he says, let's move it back one line here.
New world, multitude of worlds, perish.
Some quickly perish while others endure. So if you notice, some of these worlds, they're born from the moment we broke fate. We don't see any worlds taking place before that singularity, which is what the chapter was called in Remake. We don't see any alternate worlds taking place before that moment in time, before that break, before that singularity. That's how you know they aren't timelines. Because let's say the world of Gaia began 8,000 years ago because of some Genova-esque Big Bang or something. That would be its starting point. But no, this is different. It's encompassed by the planet, and it only exists starting at that time from when they broke fate. And as Sephiroth points out, some quickly perish, and as he's going to explain, when they perish, they go back into the life stream. Because the DNA of the life stream is memory. That's the DNA of the life stream, is memory. So again, these worlds are born from that. That's why at the beginning of the chapter, Aerith says we're in her dream, because the worlds are born from that. They're born from things like that. And as Sephiroth says, some quickly perish, go back into the life stream, while others endure for a little longer, which plays into the ending. But what Sephiroth is telling us is this is all rooted in the planet, is rooted in the singularity moment from Remake, right? All these alternate worlds, they don't have time pre-singularity. They only begin time at the singularity. They branch off, they fade out, and they go right back into the life stream, right back into the prime line. But let's keep this going. There's more to it.
While others endure. Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade. Nevertheless, their loss is not to be mourned. For it is not death, but a homecoming that awaits them.
Okay, so that's how you know that those worlds were born from the life stream and thus will go back into the life stream. And again, that life stream has a DNA that functions off of memory. That's how Sephiroth is able to bring himself back, because he's in the life stream, but he exists within Cloud's memory. All you Advent Children fans out there, you know what I'm talking about. This isn't much different.
In the planet's embrace, all life is as...
And again, and in the planet's embrace, he's talking about this specific planet. There were alternate timelines, alternate universes. You now have more than one planet. You now have more than one life stream. But Sephiroth is clearly pointing out that there is a primary planet and a primary life stream, and that all these other worlds that are popping up, they get sucked back in to this primary. That's why this is not multiverse. If it was multiverse, there'd be life stream A, B, C, D, E, F, and it would just keep going, and they wouldn't fade into each other. But what we have is life stream A, and then 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. And then when they fade, they go right back in. Keep it going.
One. All born are bound to her.
Exactly.
If this world be unmade, so too shall her children.
He'd tell you that he only cares about the planet. That he'd do everything in his power to protect and preserve it. But this isn't the way it's supposed to be.
Listen to the planet, Cloud. To her ecstatic cries.
So again, the planet's crying out because, frankly, everything's a mess.
Her rapture.
Screaming! It's screaming!
Oh, Cloud. I thought you might finally understand. Cloud, lend me your strength. Let us defy destiny together.
And now allow me to say, guys, allow me to say, One second. My opinion, don't listen to people who tell you that this trilogy is turning its back on the themes of the original FF7. They couldn't be more wrong. It's expanding on these themes. So a big theme in the original is life and death, right? That's a big theme, life and death, but not just death. The acceptance of death, accepting death. That's a big part of it. And I think the trilogy is actually doing a better job of fleshing that particular theme out. Because look at Sephiroth. He is essentially pursuing immortality. He defies death at every turn. Whether he's reviving himself in Advent Children through Lifestream Black and everything he's pulling here in this trilogy, Sephiroth defies death. And he's looking... And by the way, when they say let us defy destiny, we are all destined to die, right? We're all mortals. That's the fate we share. The fate we all have in common is that this thing, our time runs out. It's different for everybody, but we all share that same endpoint. Fate, destiny, death is a major part of it. Now, Sephiroth is working to deny that death, defy death, become immortal, make Genova immortal, immortalize the planet. And he's trying to get Cloud to see things his way, right? To deny death. Keep that in mind when we talk about the ending, everything with Aerith, right? Everything with Cloud is Sephiroth wants him to deny death. And if you look at Cloud at every turn, he already does that. With his mom's death, he never wants to talk about it. He never wants to talk about it. With the flashback, with the soldier who got swept away, he never wants to talk about it. So Cloud already defies death by sheltering his eyes, sheltering his psyche. Sephiroth is preying on that. But look at the rest of the cast. Look at their trials in the later chapters. It's all about them, in a sense, accepting a fate like that. Tifa accepts the death of her father. Barrett accepts the death of his wife. You know, Red 13 accepts everything that happened with Seto. You know, Yuffie, we're waiting for part 3, everything with her death. But you see the pattern there is the cast members, they all have a relationship with death where they accept death. They accept it's a part of life. They accept it. Sephiroth denies it, defies it. And that's what he's getting Cloud to do. Because Cloud is already doing it with his mom. He's already doing it with Nibelheim. And he's getting him to do it with Aerith. More on that later. But that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. And that's where the Gi come in. The Gi who cannot die. The Gi who cannot die. They're like the red flag for Sephiroth. Like, this is what you want? So, again, that's my point. Let's keep this going. We have much to discuss.
Let us defy destiny together. 7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see. Let go of the past, Cloud. For the future is bright. We are to bear witness to the reunion of worlds.
Reunion.
Reunion of worlds. Yep. Let's see. Then I think Aerith finds him. I think that's the end of the plot explanation. But now let's go to another very important part. So, this is something else I wanted to point out. They show you a little bit too. They show you some very important things before explaining to you everything Sephiroth explained to you. So everything that I said, my interpretation of that, keep that in mind with these scenes we see here. He has to make a choice, right? Let's skip ahead a little.
Does.
So he chooses to go this way, right? But him choosing that births this, right?
Hello?
Now ask yourself, as we see, Zack both went to Biggs and Aerith. That's because it's not alternate versions of Zack. It's rather that Zack has been fractionated, in a sense. You know what I mean? But let's move to Aerith here, because I think Aerith's point here will shine more light on it.
I know you're in there. Time's a wasting, Cloud, and it's not like we have much left.
Up and at him, soldier.
Now this threw me for a loop. A new branch in the tree. Yes, it's a good way to. It's a good way to see it.
What is this? Are we?
Actually, Kevin, that's genius. The best way to conceptualize all those alternate worlds is that the live stream and the party's world is the tree trunk. And all these alternate worlds that pop up, they're branches, but they all come from that one trunk. Anyway, keep it going. Jeez.
We could call it a homecoming.
Eh.
Or homeward bound, maybe? Let's just call it a dream. My dream.
Okay. Okay. Let's just call it a dream. My dream. So, Aerith's taking credit for this world's existence and this circumstance. It's very clear Aerith is taking credit for this and that she had a plan, right? Because they go on their whole little date, which is very sweet. Pictures, gifts, whole thing, right? Very sweet. Very enjoyable scenes. Everything about this is premeditated from Aerith. And she's letting you know this is her dream, as if she was able to conjure this up. Now, we know the reason she did it. It was to pass the white materia between worlds in the way they did. It was very elaborate. I liked that. But this is the part I don't see anyone talking about. This is the part I don't see discussed. That she's like, oh yeah, this little pocket dimension we're in, it's a dream. My dream. And even Sephiroth is like, so this is where you've been hiding. You know, like clearly she's hiding out. This was all premeditated. But this is the stuff where I'm like, is that what conjures up a new world? Is a dream? And not like an actual like sleeping dream, but like to dream something up. You know, the way you dream up an ideal reality or an ideal circumstance. Okay. Dex Holder says there's another reason why it can't be Multiverse 2. We see our Cloud and Aerith, but not the Cloud and Aerith that Zack was taking care of. It's almost like they're using them as vessels. Exactly, Dex. Exactly, because they're fractionated, right? This is a fractionated version of the ones from the tree trunk, from the Prime line. You know what I mean? It's still them. Just like the Zack in all those worlds. It's the same Zack. Okay, keep it going.
To be precise.
Actually, we don't need to keep it going. That's kind of my point there. Now, to be fair, I don't know exactly what to make of it, but it's very clear Aerith was able to do this. She was able to set up a little spot for herself. And that there was planning done here that the Aerith, so far as we knew, didn't really know about. Because remember, guys, there's something very curious going on with Aerith, that every time the Whispers touched her, they were taking memories from her. So she expressed numerous times in this game that there were things that she was forgetting, right? Because the live stream, memory, remember? So there are things that she's forgetting and being taken from her. There's something else at play here. There's something else at play, but I'll save that for when we do a more in-depth dive. Okay. Umbra, always cooking, says, I can't help but wonder if this dream reality she created is similar to that of FF10's dream, which might make sense considering it's the same universe. Yes, that is a very interesting thought, actually. Okay. Okay. Now, look. Again, we'll do an entire episode on the ending. We'll do an entire episode on the ending. But let's talk about, let me see. Just want to make sure I'm not missing nothing. I'm not. Okay. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this ending. So again, we'll do plenty on the ending, guys. We'll do plenty on the ending. In terms of this show, this ending is worthy of a 2-3 hour stream unto itself. But we're going to talk review, right? Raw and honest. This is the most raw and honest you're going to get me. I think so anyway. Let's let this roll. This is the scene. The scene. Okay? The scene. I'm going to let that roll. Actually, you can pull the music up. Now, let me just say something. This was always a tall order. This scene that they're doing right here at the ending, always a tall order. That scene from OG FF7 might be the most iconic scene in gaming history. So no matter what, this was big shoes to fill. Now, let's get to it. Let's skip ahead a little, huh? So all of this, by the way, guys, so this will definitely go through this on a podcast. The white and black whispers. Look up Livestream White, Livestream Black. That's clearly what's going on here. Just like there's a future Sephiroth in play, there might be a future Aerith in play as well. But also, I did think this was a great touch. Like getting to hear Aerith's actual prayer. That was such a nice touch. Actually hearing the prayer as we walk up. So, like, this right here, so good. So good, this right here. The white and black whispers flying around. Livestream white, livestream black. She's praying for everyone's safety.
So please, tell me how to do that. I'm begging you.
Because again, this is a tough scene to do. And the music. Remember I said the soundtrack and the gameplay? Exactly, Noct Flugel. Exactly. Now, this part was awesome. This part was awesome. For a minute there, I really thought he was going to do it. I really thought he was going to do it. The suspense, too. Whoever filmed this did a good job. Wow, you could really leave him there. Here he comes.
No!
The suspense is good. So this, huh? This is some crazy stuff. And they cut you right out. They don't let you see it. But let's... Oh. Actually, it comes pretty shortly. See that right there? Keep that in mind. Blood on the sword. That was a nice touch. Got him. I do wish they would have shown it. Oh, God. Stop doing that. I will say, So right off the bat, initial complaint. I wish they showed a little more. I wish they showed a little more. It was very well executed. But we'll keep this going. I have more thoughts. Got him.
Aerith!
So here's the part that I think throws everyone for a loop, right?
Don't wait.
Don't weep. Don't weep.
Your tears are empty. Just like you.
See, now this.
It's okay.
Like, it's very, to me, that's clear. We'll wait a little longer. See, that's what I mean. Like him, the blood is on him. That's something else you got to notice too. Like, he's clearly holding her. Like, I know they flashed to her being dead, her being alive. I don't think it's two different worlds. I don't think so, because they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing the same thing. Although, I have more thoughts on that. We got to let it play out.
And so it begins. A confluence of worlds.
Yep.
and
I think
emotions.
I know.
Loss, chief among them. It engulfs fleeting moments of joy, transforming them into rage, sadness, hatred. Never have I felt them so keenly.
Here we go.
I got this.
Zane, we'll discuss that, Zane. We'll discuss that.
However, we'll never see the truth with such clouded eyes.
Shut up!
See, that's the other thing too. That's the other thing too.
After all, you're just a puppet.
Okay, now we can... Great boss fight. Great boss fight. Great boss fights, I should say. I will say, final boss ladder was awesome. Final boss ladder was awesome. I will say, though, I hated this. I hated that he just flies away. Oh, he knows this isn't over. Like, I don't know. Love the final boss ladder. That one didn't sit too well with me. Now, clearly Zack ain't done. We're going to see Zack in part 3, obviously. But let's do this now. Because we got to talk about it. And I get it. They gave us a lot to talk about. People are going to be talking about this scene until the next game comes out. So there she is. See clearly. Here we go. See, nobody else is there. Nobody else is there. If there wasn't something going on with Cloud's perceptions, the rest of the party would still be there, but they're clearly showing you. He's in his own world, you might say. And they're surrounded by the White Whispers. Read Livestream White, I'm telling you. On the ending episode of the podcast, we'll get into that.
Aerith. Wake up.
I'm telling you. She's not alive. She's not just alive in some other world. Although, technically speaking, we'll get to the technically. We'll get to the technically soon. I just want to get through this. Now, actually, I'll save it. I'll save it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. Everybody's sad. Everybody's big sad. She is in his memory the same way Sephiroth is. Yes, Josh. Yes, Josh. I feel like we're missing something in this scene. It's deliberate. So you got to understand. Rebirth does not give you the full picture. Do you guys remember the Nibelheim scene? Do you remember the Nibelheim scene at the beginning of the game? Do you remember them cutting it right before you saw the finale of the Nibelheim scene? They didn't give you the full Nibelheim scene. So in the same way, they're not giving you the full death scene. Rebirth is not letting you see the full picture yet. You didn't get to see the full picture of Nibelheim. You're not going to get to see the full picture of this. And we'll get into the reasons why. Just give me a minute. Because come on, they've got to show us Cloud laying Aerith into the life stream, into the water. Like, you have to. That's iconic. But they're saving that for part 3. To the detriment of this part, mind you. I think they should have shown it here.
Forever. We'd best get moving.
Yep. Sounds good.
That's my point? Yeah, attaboy. See, I'm sorry. Cloud doesn't hold his... I'm going to keep it going. That's a distortion.
I'll see you off.
He's not doing well, guys. That's the thing. Cloud is not doing well. And they deliberately show you this next part, okay? They deliberately show you this next part. It's almost like he doesn't want to acknowledge that. Remember what I was saying earlier? It's all about who can accept death, who cannot accept death. The party members in their backstories have all accepted death in one way or another. Yuffie accepted the death of Sonnen, so to speak. You have Tifa with her father, Barrett with his wife, Myrna, I think it was. Again, all the party members have this history of accepting death, but Cloud still can't process and won't process the death of his own mother, the Nibelheim incident. He hasn't accepted that, And he's not accepting this. That's what Sephiroth wants. Because Sephiroth wants that immortality. Sephiroth wants that. And if he can get Cloud to deny death, let us defy destiny together, then he officially has him where he wants him. Getting him to deny death, not accept death, in the way Sephiroth won't accept death. Whether it's here, whether it's Advent Children, doesn't matter where it is. Now, let's keep it going. Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, Kevin, in some ways. I do think there's a... What?
Come on.
See, now check it. Like, they're deliberately showing you that this is a problem. It's not a good thing that he's seeing Aerith. This is a problem. You see that? This is a problem. She's not happy-go-lucky alive in some alternate world. Hooray, we rescued her. No, 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 no. This is a problem. He's putting the black materia in his sword. He hasn't accepted his past. He's still having distortions and delusions. This is a problem. This is not a yay, Aerith survived moment. Let's keep going. Also, Zack here. Zack clearly going to be in part 3. He's going to collide with Aerith in some way. Because they have to keep Aerith around, right? They've got a third game to sell. They got to keep Aerith around. Now, let's get to this for a second here. Let's get to this. His mental is messed up. That's the point. And that's the part I think so many people are missing. Let's just take this back to Cloud. Cloud is an unreliable narrator. That's literally what he is. He is an unreliable narrator. That is his plot trope. That is his archetype. He is an unreliable narrator. Therefore, the audience, knowing that, should not trust Cloud's perceptions. And if this unreliable narrator is seeing a cut of reality that the rest of us cannot see, that is a problem. Now, I will say this, because we're getting to it and we're kind of analyzing more than I thought we would. Kind of got away from the review of it all. Here's what I'm going to say. I think this ending is a little sloppy. And I'll tell you why. And we'll get into it on another episode too. But I think this ending, even though I think the plot overall is good, and even though I think this ending does massive amounts of good for Cloud's character, I do think the execution was a little sloppy. Because with Aerith's death, I didn't want to think. I wanted to just feel. That's what I wanted, right? Maybe some you out there disagree with me. But when it came to Aerith's death, I wanted to just feel. I didn't want to have to think about what just happened, what's real. Should I feel like she's gone? Should I not? Like, I say it all the time. Human beings have trouble thinking and feeling at the same time. That's why, ladies, pardon my French, but that's why when a dude is nervous, he can't get it up. Because you cannot think and feel like that at the same time. You're either predominantly thinking or predominantly feeling, and when they clash is when problems happen. I felt this ending clashed everything I was feeling and everything I was thinking. I had to do so much thinking on top of the feeling, right? And all that feeling made it so that I couldn't think clearly. And I get it. It gives you a similar perspective to Cloud. I get that. But this is Aerith's death scene. In the original, she died and you felt it because you didn't have to think. You knew what just happened. That's what the devs want, though. Josh, yes. Josh, I don't deny that is the devs' vision and they executed it. My opinion is I would have preferred something else. But I'm not going to tell you it's bad. I'm not going to tell you it's bad or that it's a bad decision. It's just I would have... in my infinite wisdom as a schmuck on YouTube, just would have done things differently. That's all. Because think about the Barrett and Dine scene. I forgot to clip it. I was going to clip it for this episode. But those of you who watched my streams and watched me stream that game, I was a wreck during the Barrett and Dine scene. I was sobbing manly tears. because I didn't have to think. I didn't have to think about what I just saw. I felt it, and then I knew it because I felt it. Now with this, they took a different direction. They wanted to put you in Cloud's head for the moment, and I get that. I would have preferred to have spent more time in the party's headspace rather than Cloud's headspace. We could have done both, but I felt like there was too much thinking, not enough feeling at that particular scene. Now, I will say this ending is a brilliant setup for part 3. That's the thing. Rebirth's ending, it's a better setup than it is a conclusion. And that makes sense because we're at the halfway point of the story, guys. You know, I understand, at the end of the day, I understand why things transpired the way they did. And I am not dissatisfied. I still think it's a good ending. I just think it was executed sloppily, and in the sense of their cuts, I think it was executed a little sloppy. And I think there was just too much thinking, not enough feeling. But some of that might be personal preference. Let's keep this going, because there's more to discuss.
Can you not raise it just a wee bit higher?
Screw you, cat. How's this?
See, this is a problem. That's the thing, guys. If Aerith survived, the narrative would be, can you elaborate on sloppy? Absolutely. I felt like some of the cuts were sloppy in the sense that, how do I put it? Sephiroth coming down and Cloud like being there to defend. I felt like the cuts made it so that you weren't sure what happened until it was like spelled out to you. You know, I felt like a lot of the cuts that were designed to build suspense and leave the audience in the dark, I think there was just too much of it. And I think that showing the impact of the blade would have been better. I think they created a scenario where they had to cut around a scene, right, of Sephiroth getting Aerith. They had to cut around it, and that made it feel a little sloppy. Right? As opposed to just giving it to us directly. That's what I would have went for. I mean, we do know Cloud denies what he sees. He told Tifa she didn't have a scar, and who could forget that? Yes. He's unreliable. His perceptions are unreliable. Not to mention her showing up to fight beside Cloud, because it's like, did she die or not? That's my point, Dex Holder. That's sort of my point there. I think Aerith look, here's the thing. In FF7, guys, nobody really dies. If you're remembered, if you're in someone's memories, you're still alive. You could still be brought back in similar ways. Maybe not materially, although Sephiroth figured out a way to do it. But like in Advent Children, Aerith lives in Cloud's consciousness. That's how they explain it in Advent Children. I think something similar is going on here. Not exactly, but Aerith lives in Cloud's consciousness. That's how she's able to interface with him. But let's go. Let's keep going.
Oh, shit.
Nice catch.
So, what Aerith actually do anyway? Well?
So they make it clear, talking about her like she's not there. They make that
with
clear.
that, we are cleared for takeoff.
Finally.
Poor Yuffie.
It's not fair.
Now this you have to remember. Red sensing Aerith. Red is able to interface with the life stream. He's able to interface with the planet's messaging. Right? Just like all those random dimensions that pop up and fade that Sephiroth was talking about, it's similar with Aerith. It's similar with Aerith. Because Red is able to... Everything comes from the planet. Everything stems from the planet, including this Aerith, who is not physically with them, but is clearly there in spirit, and Red is able to sense that. There's a reason that people who use their eyes don't see Aerith, but Red, who has other senses, is able to.
Aerith?
See, he's not looking at her. He senses her. He's not looking at her because she's not actually there. Hollow. Hollow. These are all bad omens.
The hell? The reunion.
Yep.
Hey, you coming or what?
Yeah.
I see
One
the
sec.
rainbow effect being discussed. We're going to bring it up. I'm waiting for a certain shot. I'm going to bring up the rainbow. No, everyone likes to talk about that.
You have to promise not to look up.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. So Cloud is also seeing a sky that no one else is seeing. Cloud is seeing an Aerith no one else sees. Cloud is seeing a sky no one else sees. How is this happening? Remember what Sephiroth said. The confluence of worlds, right? That these worlds are going to merge. It appears to me the worlds have merged for Cloud. Cloud is living in two worlds at once, in a sense, right? He's seeing the apocalyptic sky that nobody else is, right? But he's also with the party that's in the blue sky, right? They're the same world. You get it? Like, they're the same world. This fractured sky Cloud can see, and the clear sky the party sees.
Don't look up.
Well, now I gotta look.
They do. They're showing you. They're showing you.
Fine.
They see a perfectly clear sky. Cloud doesn't. The worlds have merged, right? And Cloud has this way of being in two at one. The apocalyptic sky that's converged, that's where Aerith is alive, in a place that is not long for this world. I'm not denying that Aerith is, in a sense, living somewhere, but where she's living is doomed to fade eventually, hence the fractured sky. Throughout the entire Zack journey, that fractured sky meant end of the world. So where Aerith ever is right now, where she's existing, she's not long for it. That's what they're showing you. The world that the party's in with Cloud, that world's going to stick around. But whatever got set up as a consequence of the whole ordeal with Cloud and Sephiroth, where Aerith can manifest herself to Cloud here, has to do with that fractured sky. I think we get a little something else.
Don't
One
let
second.
it get to you.
Don't let what get to me?
It's not real. Just an illusion.
Okay, come on. How on the nose can you be? It's not real, just an illusion. The things he's seeing that no one else is seeing, he's going, it's not real, it's just an illusion. He doesn't even realize the irony of his statements, and that's the irony. Remember what Aerith said to Cloud in Remake at that scene. Don't fall in love with me. It's not real. It's not real. Where do I think they're going with this? That's very ironic. It's so on the nose. All of this is on the nose. They're deliberately showing you. Cloud sees the apocalyptic sky. They don't see the apocalyptic sky. Cloud's like, oh, it's just an illusion. Like, anyway. Here's what's going to happen, guys. Cloud did not accept Aerith's death. Aerith died, in a sense, right? She's still alive in the live stream. That's how she's manifesting here in this moment, right? But Aerith died. Is there a fractured version of herself manifesting to Cloud and only Cloud? Yes. But this is where part 3 is going. Here's my prediction. I saw some people bring it up. Here we go. The whole Tifa live stream scene, where Tifa has to go into the live stream and rebuild Cloud's memories and walk him through the real Nibelheim scene, that scene's going to be double factor now. now Tifa, and maybe Tifa and Aerith, it might be just Tifa, might be Tifa and Aerith, but now we're not just going to walk through the Nibelheim scene, we're going to walk through Aerith's death scene. And just like the Nibelheim scene hasn't shown us the conclusion yet, neither has Aerith's death. We haven't seen Cloud lay her in the water because he hasn't accepted her death. So we don't get to see that. So I think in the scene where Tifa goes into the life stream to rebuild Cloud, it will not be just the Nibelheim scene. It'll be the Nibelheim scene and the Forgotten Capital. They'll have to rebuild both because for Cloud to move on, for Cloud to finally be himself, for Cloud to become the hero, he has to accept death. He has to accept the death of his mother. He has to accept the death of Aerith because that's what Aerith is, guys. Aerith is essentially just a repeat of Cloud needing to accept the death of his mother. That's at the core of this whole story. The whole reason this story got written was because Sakaguchi, the founder of Final Fantasy, lost his mother. And he wanted to create a game, a story that evoked that feeling. That's what this is all about. So right now, Cloud is not accepting Aerith's death. And that's keeping her around. In the way Aerith had a dream and her dream manifested into that little world, same thing's going on here with Cloud. He will not accept Aerith's death. And part 3, he's going to have to. He's going to have to. Because that's what this comes down to. Accepting death and defying it. Sephiroth wants to defy death. And he just tricked Cloud into defying death. Denying it, rather. Denying it, not defying. That would be him defying it himself. But he just tricked Cloud, set up the perfect chess pieces to put Cloud in a situation where he denies death outright. Denies it with his mom, denies it with Aerith. We'll see what happens next. Okay. Let me see. What about Tifa's reaction? Sorry for mentioning it. Just want someone to rebuke it. What do you mean by Tifa's reaction? I'd be happy to discuss that. That scene could make or break the trilogy. Lance, I'm with you. No, Tifa in the live stream scene, that's the scene now. That's the scene now. They've decided to double down on that scene. They decided to work with this scene a little bit, but that's the scene now. First time I hear that, and wow, that's both nice and sad for real, and love how it's going. That's the thing, is it would make perfect sense for Cloud's character. It would make perfect sense with everything he's going through and everything Sephiroth is setting him up for. And it's great because now it keeps Aerith around for part 3, which is what we all want in some way, right? I want her dead because I love the original story. I think the story works better with her dying. It's all about accepting death, right? And Cloud can finally cope with the death of his mother after he copes with the death of Aerith, so on and so forth, essentially. But anyway, I digress. Let me see here. Okay. She saw 2 versions of Aerith, one with blood and one without. Look at the scene where she runs up to Cloud and Aerith. It flashes between both versions of it, and it's clear for Tifa's perspective. Let's do that. Okay, here's the big moment. Cloud is big sad. They fight. Give me a second. I'm trying to pull it up for you. Let's see here. And then we flash back. No, I think it's earlier. I think it's at the earlier end of it. I'm going to try and find it via the timestamp. Give me just a second here. Right? I'll put it on mute. We'll keep it running so at least you guys could see a little something. But where does Tifa show up? Here we go. Here's where the gang shows up, right? See, they see her no blood. They see her no blood laying on the floor, right? Tifa's going. There's blood, no blood. Blood, no blood. I see your point. Blood, no blood. But then I want to see which one she lands in. Does Tifa settle? I think I know what to make of it, but I just want to settle in where there's blood and where there isn't. Okay, I see Dexholder says, I don't think that's Tifa's perspective because those flashes more so related to Cloud's Genova flashes. That's true, because the no blood is Cloud holding a living Aerith, and the blood is Cloud holding the dead Aerith. And the living Aerith only exists in his denial of death. Yeah, that's the thing. That's so true. That's so true. They zoom into Tifa for the reason, like Zane, for the reason Dex is bringing up. They zoom into Tifa because Tifa could see that Cloud is not looking at Aerith as if she's dead. See, she's not bleeding, but she's clearly eyes closed. She's out. Because you're right, those are Genova flashes. They zoom in on Tifa here because she can see that Aerith is clearly dead, but the Cloud doesn't really seem to be processing it. That's why they show the flashes. But anyway, let's save that for the ending. I mean, let's save that for the episode I'm going to do on that. Let's save that for the episode I'm going to do on that. All right. So overall, look, final words, I suppose. I'll say this. This was one of my favorite games of the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years. This is easily a top 3 Final Fantasy for me ever. Ever. Top 5 at its worst. I thought it was immaculate. I thought it was incredible. The game is incredibly fun to play. It's rewarding to play. The character moments, the character arcs, the character, just even like the voice acting too. We didn't touch on that much. It's so immersive. Everything about the game is immersive. I think that's what makes it so magnificent. The combat is immersive. The world is immersive. The towns are immersive. The characters, the plot, all of it. Now, I do stand by that I think the ending was a little sloppy. I don't think it was a bad ending. I just think with the Aerith death scene, you made me think more than I felt. And that wasn't what I wanted. But it's not about what I want. It's about what the devs want. And I respect that. Now, overall, I'm giving this game a 9.5 out of 10. That's my final word. You guys heard me. I have a lot of criticisms about the game. But that doesn't mean I don't love it, and that doesn't mean that it didn't shine bright when it was doing great. And it did. Most, like 95% of the game is immaculate. There's just 5% that I think really needs to be cleaned up. We went over a bunch of them. I don't need to reiterate them here. But yeah, the game is, as Dark Scouter Gamer says, the game is legit amazing. Legit amazing. They really knocked it out of the park. They really knocked it out of the park. Oh boy. All right. This is Cloud's one bad day. Exactly, Kevin. That's some Killing Joke right there. If I'm not mistaken, that's Killing Joke. Anyway, look. We're going to wrap it up here, guys. It's late. I need to hit the hay. if I don't get tempted to play Rebirth before going to bed, because I have been playing that game so much. I'm platinuming it. I love it so much. Best gaming experience ever for me. Lands, it might be number 2. I think FF14 is always going to be my best experience, but this might be number 2. I've had a tremendous time playing it. I'm going to continue playing it. I will easily put 200 hours into this game. It's so much fun. The story is beautiful. The characters are beautiful. And despite my criticisms of the gameplay here and there, of the plot here and there, the game downright succeeds at pretty much everything it sets out to do. And I applaud them for it. I'm excited for part 3. I thought this game was incredible. It's worth the play if you haven't played it. I don't know who would watch 2.5 hours of me talking about it without playing it, but it's remarkable. It's the best game Square Enix has put out. Wow. It's the best game this studio has put out. Because I'll say FF14 is just immaculate. But Creative Business Unit 1, this is their best Final Fantasy game since 10. This is Creative Business Unit 1's best Final Fantasy game since Final Fantasy 10. They're on a roll. They found something special here. This, in a lot of ways, should be the new standard for Final Fantasy. I'm not saying they need to have this combat, but this level of combat. Oh man, I hope you guys all liked today's episode. It was fun. I'm eager to do a whole episode on the ending. We'll do one of those next week because I could talk about this ending for hours. It took up like 30, 40 minutes here at the end anyway. But anyway, look, I got to wrap it up. This was awesome. Much love and major shout out to Josh Z and Mira Limit for the super chats. Thank you both very much. You know you never need to do that, but I always appreciate it when you do. That said, we're going to close it up here. It's been real. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll be live again real soon. My parents are in town this weekend, and I have a wedding, so I won't be around much this weekend, but not to worry. Plenty more coming on the horizon. I've got some Kingdom Hearts videos I want to publish in the next week. I have a lot of FF7 stuff I want to make, but I want to wait till we're a little further out of spoiler territory. That said, I'm done blabbing. We're going to wrap it up here. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. You guys are all awesome. Thanks for chilling in the lodge. As I always say, the chat, you are the highlight of the lodge. We love you. We're wrapping it up here. Thanks for hanging out. Love you all. And good night.